Hey, good morning. Happy Sunday to everybody. Tim from Alpha Wolves Trading coming at you with this week's market overview and some earning stocks to watch for next week. Just going to hop right into it here. Last week's stocks to watch and their performance for the pro members. Actually, a couple of these are going to carry over into this week's stocks to watch for the pro members. Within this list also are some stocks that we have live trade plans for. Kind of went over a little update on why we've taken the trade or why we have a pending plan and what I'm looking for. So that is something that we are going to continue to do each and every week. So within this list, there are some stocks that there are some actual trade plans in play and some that are pending. So the performance, we had a nice move in Neo. Actually was up really nice off the 60 minutes. NTWK, really thin stock. WTRC, some nice movers within that list. All right, let's talk about next week. Next week for the economic calendar, we do have quite a bit of data actually that's coming out. New home sales, ISM non-manufacturing. We got the beige book that's going to be coming out. Trade balance, weekly jobs claims. What else we got? Non-farm payrolls and unemployment rate, average hourly earnings, and wholesale inventories. As far as stocks to watch for next week, from the earnings perspective, Neo happens to be reporting Tuesday morning. We'll go into the list of stocks in a minute. But we're winding down earnings season, right? We kind of delayed the outcome of the China trade deal. North Korea wound up not being a positive event. It's just kind of that also is on hold. So I mean, we're kind of in this area on a lot of charts, and we'll see it in a second here, that we're in consolidation mode, right? So we could continue to consolidate and build up some energy before we make our next significant move, which could either be up or down. I mean, nobody knows which way we're going to head. But I think the most interesting sector right now for me is IBB. Watching that one pretty closely. I mentioned last week that I thought it was the most constructive, and it actually looks like it's trying to break out a little bit, but we'll get to that in a second. T2108, which has been a concern to me, has been extremely overbought, right? When we get up into the 70, 80 area, that is an area where you need to be cautious. Now, we can work this off through time. We don't necessarily have to have a big dramatic drop in price. If we continue to consolidate, that T2108 could just work its way lower. I'd like to see it get back down into the 50 range, make me feel a little more comfortable about going long on some stocks, but something to keep an eye on there. T2107 is still, this is the amount of stocks above their 200-day moving average, and that is actually in the 50 range, which is kind of where I like to see it. Actually, I'd like to see it pull back into the 30 or even the 20s, because that's where you start to get a little aggressive. But keep an eye on that. I think we also need to be keeping an eye on volatility. Could be an area where we could see a double bottom bounce if the markets do start to roll over. So we'll take a look at that in a second. It's on this week's list. All right, so IBB, I just brought that up. So, last week I mentioned that this was really kind of constructive, right? We had this big pop, and then we had this consolidation. We broke above an area of price resistance. We came back, we tested, and then we started moving higher again. Now we are coming up into another little area of price resistance, but of all the indexes out there, this one I think has actually kind of built up a little bit of energy and looks as though, we've got a reverse head and shoulders pattern going on here with the IBB. It's the sector that I am definitely going to be keeping an eye on. IWM, we're consolidating right there. That's the small caps right here at the 200-day moving average. right, flagging out a little bit, and it's actually trying to hold this 200 days. So I think that's kind of impressive. It is overbought, uh, but maybe we just continue to consolidate here. So small caps, I think, still look pretty compelling, but we need to build up probably more energy there before our next significant move. IYT transportation, we got up to the 200 day and we actually pulled back a little bit below the 200 day and closed below the 200 day last week. So potentially continued weakness there in the transportation space. QQQs, we're right at the 200 day. We're right at potential price resistance. Consolidation. I could see that very easily. I did see Carter Worth was positive on Facebook, and some of the old large cap tech names. Maybe we'll see what happens next week. We have one thing to keep an eye on is the semis pulled up into this area of this trend line and found some resistance, but then pulled back a little bit. It looks like we're going to retest this resistance area. There are a couple of sectors that I like with SMH, bots and robo. Those are a couple of robotics ETFs. I read an article this week about the fact that last year was the highest placement of robotics for U.S. companies, I think maybe ever. And that is a big trend, especially with aging workforce and trying to increase productivity. And I think that's a trend that will continue for many years to come. So that is something that I'm keeping a pretty close eye on. I don't have those charts up, but take a look at them. They're actually sitting in an area of potential price resistance as well. Trend line resistance. Could see a bit of a pullback. If SMH though takes out this trend line and starts heading towards new highs, those two ETFs could follow. Now this has had a huge run. Really needs to consolidate. I think that would be much healthier. We'll have to see what happens, but $100 on an SMH. Like to see that hold. You got the 200 day there, and you also have potential price support. Nice round number. If we do get a pullback, I'd like to see 100 hold as support. SPY, S&P 500, the thing is consolidating, right? I mean, the question is, do we have a catalyst, though, to help drive us to the new highs? And I don't know that we have that catalyst. We'll have to see. The Fed beige book could be interesting. It seems that everyone is thinking the Fed is now on the sidelines, that we're not going to see any more rate increases. And maybe that's good for the markets, right? We'll have to see how it plays out. But TVIX, talking about a potential double bottom here. We had this huge spike in volatility through December, and then, of course, we've been pulling back. But we're getting down to this area where we could find support for a potential bounce. So I think it's worth keeping on the radar for a short-term trading opportunity, maybe day trading opportunity. Short-term swing, and you always have to make sure you play that size appropriate. TZA, same thing. If the IWM winds up rolling over, we are at an area where maybe we're finding support for a bounce. And if the IWM, if small caps take a hit, TZA is one to keep an eye on for a short-term trading opportunity as well. USO, oil actually pulled back a little bit, but energy names actually look pretty good. Last week I mentioned CHK as an earnings play and one that I would probably look to take. I put out a trade plan for it. I did take some shares in it after their earnings report. A lot of insider buying there. Like the name. WTI is another one that I'm keeping a close eye on. That looks pretty good. But there are several oil names that and energy names I think you need to keep an eye on. I think this is a pretty compelling space, even though oil did pull back a little bit. And I think that had to do with the fact that the U.S. Sold some reserves or was looking to sell some reserves, and that's why we saw a pullback in oil. Home builders came up into this trend line, finding some resistance. Maybe the Fed beige book and some of the new home sales data that comes out next week impacts this, but looks as though maybe we're going to take a pause, pull back a little bit here. Building materials. So it's funny, it's so funny how quickly things change. Last week, everybody and their brother was talking about copper and building materials, stuff like that. And it was coming up into this area of resistance, coming up into the 200-day, and we saw a bit of a pullback. Now, it's got a reverse head and shoulders pattern there. Maybe we see a little more of a pullback in building materials. I think Home Depot is also in this ETF, but maybe pull back into the $54 area, see if that holds as support. XLE, like I was just saying, very constructive looking setup here, kind of flagging out. Even though oil pulled back, XLE was up a little bit on Friday. I think you keep an eye on the energy space. XLF testing the 200-day moving average. Big thick stocks, more swing and long-term hold plays, but worth keeping an eye on XLF. I'm not crazy about the space. I think there are probably some good values in the financial space, but I probably would look to get involved on a pullback closer to the 50-day moving average. Industrials consolidating over the 200-day. A little bit of weakness last week, not a tremendous amount here. Maybe that was off a disappointment that we didn't get a China deal. But worth keeping an eye on. XLP, consumer staples, nice consolidation after the big run up. Maybe we come back and test the 50-day moving average. This has been a sector that's got some pressure. Kraft Heinz and a couple of other big names. Though last week I was talking about one of the names, or a couple of names that look good, like Simple Brands, SMPL. Another one to kind of take a look at maybe is Hain Celestial. It's been really beaten up, and last week it was actually getting a little bit of action. I think there might have been some insider activity there. Worth keeping an eye on. Maybe at some point there will be some I think merger and acquisition within that space, but we'll see what happens. Utilities have been acting pretty strong here at an area of potential resistance. Maybe we take this out next week, but utilities are a space to keep an eye on. Consumer discretionary consolidating over the 200-day. Maybe we continue to consolidate a bit here. Let's see, metals and mining pull back. Gold pulled back a little bit last week. I thought that was interesting. I mean, that was everybody and their brother seemed to be on the gold train just a week or so ago, the last couple of weeks, and it looks maybe that is taking a pause. XOP energy also held up pretty well, sitting right on top of the 50-day, testing this trend line. See if maybe we can get a breakout this week. And then XRT retail, which will be in focus this week because there are a lot of retail names reporting. Not my favorite space, but did take out this trend line. Take out this trend line and could be coming up to test 200-day. We'll have to see what happens with the retail space next week, but we'll see. Not, like I said, not my favorite space. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of stocks just off of the earnings calendar that I think are, at least these are the ones that are on my radar for next week. And let's hop right into those. Okay, ACRX. This has already had a nice run. It's had a 3-day run, but here's what I find interesting. MACD Histo just went positive. Stochastics are curling up. These guys report, and actually let me pull that up so that I can be, they report on the 7th. Okay. Now it's had a 3-day run. It's coming up into potential price resistance, but if these guys report a good number, this thing could rip. Maybe get a 5 test. And I do like the slope of the stochastics and the MACD. I think it's kind of interesting. Maybe, if you want to take a lotto trade into earnings, you just take a small piece, just a little lottery play, right, on a pullback to say 340, 330, 325, somewhere in that area, heading into the earnings. Maybe you play it ahead of earnings and you take a little bit out and then get on the sidelines. But it's got a pretty interesting setup. And I think Ladenburg put $100 price target on this thing, which is pretty crazy. They did an offering in November, $3.15. Pretty close to where that offering was done. So they're not going to have to do an offering in the near future. At least I wouldn't think that they would. So you had insider buys in August from 275 to 335, multiple insider buys. So you're kind of within that range. If they have a good earnings report, this thing could get a pretty nice pop. 9.6 million shares in the float. It's got a small float. Look at what BPTH did last week, right? Actually, it's kind of a sore subject for me because we were looking at trying to jump in it for a day trade. And really, we had the perfect setup. Didn't pull the trigger. Was looking for more of a pullback and never really got it. But it did give some really nice setups throughout the day, intraday, for a day trading opportunity. And I'm not saying that ACRX is going to do that, but definitely worth keeping an eye on for a potential short-term swing or day trading opportunity in ACRX. SESN. So this is, they did an offering, let's see, at $1.80 per share. 150 million mixed shelf. So it's got an interesting look. It's coming up into this trend line. They report earnings. Hold on a second. This is showing 4/3/2019, but if I'm not mistaken, this reports Monday morning. At least that's what I thought I saw. So hold on a second. Let me pull this up. Let me take a look. SESEN. Yeah, SESEN looks like Monday morning before the open. It's flirting with the $1 holler. MACD looks like it's about to go positive, and then you've got this the stochastics curling up. If this thing reports good earnings and it pops, I wouldn't chase this. Maybe look for an intraday setup. 65 million shares in the float, worth having on the radar if they do report Monday. NEO, which is had the big pop, right? They're going to be reporting on Tuesday morning. Look, if they report a good number, a potential sympathy play could be KNDI. Solo actually held up really well. Now, they're not a car manufacturer, but it's actually held up pretty well. This Solo. Go back to the daily here. So if NEO reports good numbers, I'm not looking to necessarily play NEO, but I could look to play some sympathy plays, right? KNDI being one, Solo being another one, and then also FUV is another one that could also get some action if NEO reports a good number. Now, if NEO reports a bad number and gets hit, you could also look for these things to pull back in sympathy with NEO. So keep that in mind. All right, YEXT. This one kind of hurts me a little bit because I owned it. I owned it from down here, over here, and it had this amazing. I sold it, took some profit. It had this amazing run, pulled back, and I've been looking to try to get back in. This is more of a long-term hold play for me, and I've been trying to get back in, and I just haven't been successful in doing so. But I like the look of this chart. You got a reverse head and shoulders pattern. We're testing the 200-day moving average. We're flirting with the $20 holla. They report Wednesday after the close, and it's broken this trend line. It's got a really great looking setup on the daily. I may take a little position ahead of earnings, just a little starter, and then if it pulls back, they for some reason disappoint and pulls back into the $16 area or lower, I probably would look to add to that position. Like I said, this is more of a long-term hold play, but I do like YEXT quite a bit. MEET, full disclosure, I own it from the $5 range, and do I own enough? No, I wish I owned more. They're going to report earnings. Where are they reporting? Wednesday before the open. Great looking setup on the daily here. It's been in consolidation mode. Looking for it to take out the $6 holla with some conviction and potentially go up and test somewhere in that $8 range. Their earnings have been really, really strong. We'll see if they can continue with that. Now, if they report good earnings and the stock pulls back, because sometimes stocks do that, the $5 range, right, or the $4.50 range, I would look to add. This is more of a longer term swing, or I guess long term hold for me. But meat is definitely one that I will be watching. GNC, I had a nice little pop last week right into this trend line and pulled back. So kind of a failed breakout there. Tried to take out the 200-day. Stochastics are actually starting to curl down, and MACD is actually looking like it might curl down. I am still interested in their earnings. Now, if they disappoint and they pull back to the $2 range, I might take just a little starter there as a potential double bottom bounce. If they report good earnings and give good guidance, I think you're going to see them take out this trend line. Pretty highly shorted name, big short interest in this name, only 20.9 million shares in the float. So if they report good numbers and give good guidance, this thing could really squeeze. So it's on the radar for potential short-term day trading opportunity. It's also on the radar for a potential swing on a pullback, depending on what they have to say in their earnings call. MVIS, this thing is a perpetual disappointer. I've played it in the past. They've got earnings coming up. Let's see, when do they report? They report MVIS. Where are you? Okay, on the 5th. So they report Monday. Is that right? So, look, this one, it has broken this trend line. It's at an area of price resistance. It's already had a pretty nice move, but it was kind of consolidating above the 200-day moving average. If they report good numbers, this one could go. 68 million shares in the float. I would not chase it. I would look for some kind of an intraday setup. If it breaks above this 143, 150 area, maybe you look for it to pull back, test that as support for a bounce. Day trading opportunity, possibly a swing, depending on what they have to say in their earnings call. They tend to do a lot of, they dilute the shit out of their shareholders. So keep that in mind. They might report a good number, get a pop, and then turn around and do an offering. So LJPC, so these guys, 1.3 million shares, bought by insiders, $5.37 to $6.17. Here we are, kind of basing out. Maybe this is a bottom base pattern. They report on the 4th after the close, right? So this one could be interesting. Mainly, I'm looking at it just for a day trading opportunity. MVIS is actually reporting Tuesday after the close. All right. SPKE, so utilities. I mentioned that that sector has been pretty hot. We got Spark Energy. This has got some. I think it's got some stuff, some legal issues. But this has got an interesting look, right? So it's above the 200-day, above all the moving averages. Look at this. Look at the slope of the 20-day and the 50-day. Now it's at an area of potential price resistance if it pulls back to 950. If they have decent earnings, but it pulls back to 950, could be an interesting spot maybe to take it. 950 or even $9. See if that holds as support for a bounce. And if they report better than expected earnings, maybe we take out this 1050 area with some conviction. I wouldn't chase a gap up on it, but potentially look for. Looks like it got 11 million shares in the float, 38% short interest. Another one that could actually squeeze if they report decent numbers. So worth having on the radar for short-term trading opportunity. ARTX. This is got a pretty decent look here. Riding the 200-day moving average, pulled down, tested it. When do these guys report? ARTX reports on the 6th, which is Wednesday, after the close. Worth keeping an eye out. I like the setup on the daily. I think they make some detection equipment for airports, travel, like bomb and drug sniffing detection equipment. So it's got a pretty interesting look, but it's had a big run, right? Pull back a little bit. I think these guys might need cash, so check that out. But could be worth watching for the earnings. Plug also reporting Thursday. Now there are several names that are actually kind of reporting in this space, and there are a lot of sympathy plays within this space. So Blink is another one to maybe keep an eye on. I think that's on my list for the pro members this week. Plug is actually got a pretty interesting setup on the daily. It's consolidating right there at the 200-day moving average. This thing tends to pop and flop. They're another one that likes to dilute the shit out of the shareholders, so keep that in mind. Check to see when they did their last S3 filing or when they did their last offering. But they may need cash but it could be a good day trading vehicle. 58 million shares in the float. Worth keeping an eye on. Plug. All right, let's see. Next one here is BLDP. They report Wednesday after the close, also consolidating. So BLDP and Plug, they kind of run together. I'm trying to think of the other ones that move. It used to be Fuel Cell. But a couple of names that could potentially move with these. So BLDP coming up into a trend line that could act as resistance. I think one of the short, I think it's Seaport. Seaport, I think, is pretty negative on these guys, thinking that they're a lion scumbag firm. But worth keeping an eye on BLDP, maybe for a day trading opportunity off of earnings. And GAIA, this is a specialty retail. I'm not really all that crazy about GAIA's chart. It is in an area of potential price support, maybe worth keeping an eye on here. It's only got 7.2 million shares in the float. It's a low floater. It's trying to hold on to the 50-day. If they report a good number, maybe this gets a pop, right? So worth keeping an eye on that if it's got some volume. And then BZUN is at a very interesting area. China names were kind of hot. These guys are probably going to have some pretty tough comps. You know, they've been experiencing some pretty significant growth. We'll have to see what their earnings. I like these guys more as a long-term hold type play. Had an amazing run. It has broken that, but it is coming back to an area, a long-term trend line that could act as support. So, you know, closer to $30. I think this is really interesting, maybe for a swing or long-term hold consideration. If they report a good number, maybe it's a good day trading opportunity intraday. A couple other names, just take note of. I didn't put not putting the charts on this list here, but Salesforce, of course, that's going to be a big one for next week in terms of overall tech. Marvell Technology is another one for semiconductors. They report on Thursday after the close, so keep that in mind. We could just chop around a bit here. We'll have to see what this week provides. Be careful out there. I would suggest that you probably want to be a little bit cautious right now, because we have had a tremendous run, and I think your risk is probably more to the downside than to the upside, right? I think we're in consolidation mode. It'd be healthy to see a pullback. I would not like to see us go retest those December lows, but a pullback I think would be good. So, all right, keep in mind retail will be definitely a sector to keep an eye on this week. We got Target and Ross and Kohl's and all kinds of guys reporting. Be careful out there. Do not chase. Always have a plan. And good luck trading this week.